Today, I'm going to share my thoughts on trying to deal with your ego in the training room. Hey guys, welcome back again to another Q&A. Thanks so much to all the people that have been reaching out and sending me questions. They keep getting better and better, and I really appreciate it. Hopefully you're getting something out of these, but it also keeps me mentally engaged and stimulated because I am kind of losing my mind during this lockdown without normal life and training going on. So thanks so much for sending me the questions. I do really appreciate it. I have another great one this week from my friend Vlad. But before we get to it, please take a second, as always, to hit the subscribe button below, turn notifications on, all that kind of stuff. If you're into this video, if you like them, please give it a thumbs up below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think, okay? So we'll get right to the question here now from Vlad. And Vlad asks, how do I deal with ego in the training room? Because he said he's a very competitive guy. And then I messaged him after and sort of asked him to elaborate a little bit on it. And he basically said, talking about more his own issues, not necessarily like the ego of a training partner, but, you know, his own kind of internal struggles as being somebody that's competitive. He especially sort of mentioned, you know, trying to train with people that maybe you train with often and you normally do well against, and maybe they start getting the better of you, and just sort of managing that sort of that whole piece about staying in the right frame of mind in terms of improving and all that sort of stuff. And so I think for me, you know, ego is a very fickle thing. You know, I think that a lot of times we talk about it in a negative way. You know, in BJJ, we often say, you know, you either win or you learn. And it's kind of like we almost downplay it in the sense that it's like, you know, you shouldn't get upset with losing. It's just part of the deal. And I think the reality is that, you know, it's a double-edged sword. I think that being 100% cool with not doing well in practice and not having any issues with it is not necessarily a good thing either. I always say that, you know, ego is good. You want to let it light a fire under you, but you don't want to let it burn the house down, so to speak. You know, there's a way to channel it in a way that I think is productive, but if it gets the better of you too much, it's going to ruin everything. It's going to sort of eat you from within. Like a lot of things in life, it's about finding that middle ground and finding balance. And this is obviously not something that I can simply solve by saying one or two things. So all I can really do is offer my perspective on it, how I've gone about dealing with it, what my perspective and experiences are like with my own sort of mental game when I'm training, and, you know, hopefully some of this will be helpful for you. You know, the thing I've experienced over the years is I'm incredibly hard on myself, and I beat myself up a lot. Like, over the years, I would say that honestly, I leave most nights from training feeling shitty about myself, like feeling that I could have done better or I should have done better. I'm the kind of person that I could have, you know, 10 good rounds and I could have 2 really bad ones, and the only thing I'll think about or remember are the bad rounds. And I'm kind of like that in life in general. It is not a good way to live your life, I can assure you that, but it just sort of seems to be the way that I'm wired. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to deal with. The one thing that I will say, there's a term that I heard from a TED Talk that I liked, is the guy kind of referred to this idea of selective amnesia. And I think in order to get the most out of your training, you kind of have to be that way. Okay, you're going to always have negative things happening day in and day out in the training room. And if you're like me and you only focus on the negative things, it's only going to bring you down. What you want to try to do is remember the things from the previous day that you did well, have some things that you can work on, but try to ignore the rest of it. Every day is a new opportunity. It's another chance for you to have another go at a training partner, another opportunity to sort of right the wrongs that you did the day before or the week before. I think one of the worst things that you can do is bring sort of that baggage from one day to the next day forward, okay? It's, in my opinion, it's better to try to unload some of that negative stuff on your own at home, because if you start bringing it into each training session, I think it can really affect you negatively. You don't want to get bogged down in stuff that you screwed up yesterday. The reality is that people, they don't remember things for very long, and every day is an opportunity to kind of, get a little better, do a little better, and ultimately, people don't care that much. People move on, and training sessions come and go, and it's just part of the experience, I think. The one thing I'll say that it's important to understand is that progress is not linear. Okay, there's a great picture. I'm going to put it up here where it's sort of a line of an arrow, and people think it's sort of like what people think success is or progress is, and it's a straight line. And the other image next to it is what progress and success really looks like, and it's an arrow that's going in one direction, and then it's a ball and a mess in the middle, and then eventually it finds its way out the other side. And I think that you have to keep that in mind, and it's something I have to remind myself of a lot, is that on the road to getting better and improving, it's not a straight line. You're going to go forward several steps, then you're going to go backwards several steps, then you're going to go left several steps, and then you're going to get back to the middle, and then you're going to go to the right, and then you're going to go forward, then you're going to go back. It's this constant sort of, cat and mouse game with improvement. And I think that that's totally normal. And the reality is that anybody that really commits to doing something well is going to experience this. I can assure you that I've had so many times where I've just feel like I'm getting worse. I feel like I'm going backwards. I feel like the things that were sharp a week ago are now dull for some reason. One week I feel like I have great conditioning, and then I feel terrible, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm eating the same thing. I'm sleeping well. I'm doing the things I need to do off the mat. And that's just part of the experience. It's just part of getting better. And in fact, I often find that when I'm going through those phases, when I'm really putting the work in, putting the effort in, and when I feel like I'm backtracking, a lot of times that's the moment just before I have a breakthrough. What's the saying? It's always, the darkest just before the dawn, something cheesy like that. But I think it's true. Sometimes you have to experience what you think are setbacks when really it's kind of getting you on the road to progression. I know that sounds completely counterintuitive, but I think if you're training the right way, and I think if you're pushing yourself, you will continue to improve, but don't expect it to be simply each training session is better than the last. If that were the case, people would be better and amazing at jiu-jitsu within 2 or 3 years. Another piece that I think is really important to understand is that, if you feel frustrated, maybe that you're struggling with a training partner that you train with a lot and that's bothering you, I think you have to understand that the people that you train with are also learning your game, okay? They're progressing with you. And people aren't staying static and you're the only one getting better. It's this cat and mouse game. And I've noticed, obviously, that the people that I train with the most, they start to learn my game. They understand my tricks. They understand the things that I want to do. They've seen it over and over and over again. And I can bet your ass they're going home and being like, oh, cool, how can I stop Paul's half guard? Or how can I stop him from, trying to heel hook me or whatever? I bet you they go home and do research on your game because you're exposing weaknesses and problems in their game. And so understand that, these training partner battles are good things. You're both pushing each other to get to another level. So try to be grateful for your training partners that are pushing you. I think anytime somebody is pushing you and giving you good rounds and good work, regardless of whether you got the best of them last week or last month or whatever it is, those people are so important in your development and progress. It's just a matter of you both getting better at the same time. And so you're almost using a measuring stick that's constantly changing, right? So you're saying to yourself, well, I'm losing to this guy, but I beat him 2 weeks ago. That measuring stick is not the same anymore because that person is not a static individual. They are constantly improving as well. And they might be putting in more thought off the mat than you are. They might be thinking about things more than you are. And if you just go into the training room with the same techniques and the same strategies, people are going to figure you out. They're going to understand what you want to do. And then they present a whole new list of challenges for you to try to address. But that's the process that keeps pushing you to get better and better and better over time. Healthy competition in the training room is a good thing, okay? I'm telling you, you don't want to be the guy that's in the training room and you're rarely pushed and you're always beating people the same way over and over again. You don't want to be the guy that is always the best person in the room. Again, that might sound counterintuitive, but I can tell you from firsthand experience, I've ended up leaving environments where that was the case because I wasn't getting any better. I was training at a small gym when I started, and again, I've always struggled to a certain degree, but when I started to venture out and go into really difficult training rooms where I was getting beat more and I was losing a lot and I was being pushed on a day-to-day basis, again, this cat and mouse back and forth, some days I'd have good days, some days bad days, I would go back to that original training room with the same partners, and even though I felt like I was getting worse, I was suddenly dramatically better because I was being pushed every day in training. It was making me tougher. It was making me more resilient. It was making me think more about my technique. It was making me think more about what my opponent was doing to me. I would go home and think about it. I would research it. I would try new things the next time I was in. And when you're never challenged, even by the same people, and it's the same thing that you're doing and having success over and over again, I'm telling you, you're not going to get better that way. It might feel like you're improving, but you're not. You're staying stagnant, and you're going through the motions, and you're almost on autopilot. You don't have to think about what you're doing. Your technique is probably not improving because it's not being pushed, it's not being challenged. I've seen this time and again with people that are the best guy in almost every room. You know what happens? They do well in training all the time, and they finally face that adversity in tournaments and in big competitions when now they have people that are on their level, and they're not used to it. They're not used to being pushed. They're not used to running into roadblocks and having to really have those oh shit moments of what do I do? What did I do wrong? They only get those kind of moments in tournaments and then after that where they can go back to the gym. You want to be in an environment with people that are consistently pushing you and it's going back and forth. That, I think, will get you better in the long run faster. I can also tell you from personal experience, a lot of tournaments that I've gone into, there's been times where, I train at Parabellum a lot and no-gi. It's a tough room. It's a difficult room. And I always have moments where I have good days against certain training partners and then I go back the next day and I get my ass kicked. And I've had moments where I was getting ready to go into tournaments and I didn't feel good about myself because I wasn't having these long stretches of weeks where every time I went in, I was getting better. I was having these up and down performances in the training room, and it was causing me to sort of have anxiety leading up to the tournament because I thought, I'm not getting any better. Like, I feel like I'm stuck in this middle zone where I'm just not improving. And ultimately, I went into the tournament and I did incredibly well because I didn't realize once I was out of that environment and training with other people that I was getting better, that I was improving because I had those great training partners pushing me every day. And so sometimes it takes getting out of an environment to realize that you are improving and to realize that you are making progress even though it doesn't feel like it. I've said this before, I think you want the training room to be more difficult and more frustrating than the competition, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. If you can fail in the training room, if you can screw up in the training room, that's fine, as long as it ultimately leads to great performances and progress against other people and in big moments. That's what the whole purpose of training is for. Another piece that I would say is more common in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because of the belt system and the rank system. I see people that get super frustrated because, they do not as well against a younger, more athletic, less experienced grappler, and a lot of times they avoid training with them because that's the case. And I think that that's a mistake, and I understand that sentiment, but I think it's a mistake to shy away from those people because in that instance, I do think you're letting your ego get in the way of progressing. In 2020, rank is very relative now, and I can tell you from my own experience, I've rolled with a lot of different people from different gyms of a ton of different belt ranks. And the reality is that it's wildly different across all the gyms, even within the same gyms. The purple belts are not the same, the brown belts, the black belts. So I always think that I've always felt that in jiu-jitsu, it's the styles that make the matches, not so much the rank. So what do I mean by that? Well, you might have a guy that's like a blue or a purple or a brown belt, and maybe you're a black belt and the successful black belt, but the purple belt just gives you a lot of trouble because they have a game that just, is kind of the antidote to whatever you're doing. Just because you're struggling against people of different ranks in the training room doesn't mean that is going to translate in all situations and in all gyms. So try not to judge yourself based on the belt color of the person you're rolling with. I know that that's crazy, and I'm not saying that if you're a black belt, you should always struggle with purple belts or whatever, but try to have it in your mind that matchups are more relative than they are just a reflection of a random belt color, okay? The reality is that in 2020, people are so good now. There is so much information out there. People are getting so good so quickly. Some people are going to be better than you in a few short years than people like me that have been training for 14 years. I've seen that happen so many times, We all can train. Just because I've been doing something longer doesn't mean I'm automatically owed being better at it than somebody else, okay? Like, look at sort of like the Danaher Squad guys. Look at guys like Gordon Ryan. They've been training a fraction of the time as some of these long-standing world champions. And the reality is if they fought Gordon Ryan or some of these guys, these world champions would probably get beaten badly, okay? So it's an experience that happens to everybody, and I just wanted to voice that because I think it's not talked about quite enough in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community. I try to go towards the difficult matches. I don't care what belt rank they are. If you're a blue belt and you push me, then I'm getting good work from you. If you're a black belt and you push me, then I'm getting good work for you. At the end of the day, it's irrelevant. I just want to get better. I just want to improve. And so, again, try not to look at belt or years of experience necessarily as the only sort of metric that matters. What matters is how they perform against you. It depends on, it's like weightlifting. Everybody wants to put on big numbers on the bar, but really you should be weightlifting as if that you can't see what number is on the weights. Let your body tell you what's heavy. If that turns out to be a bench press of 150 pounds or if that turns out to be a bench press of 300 pounds, you can move what you can move, okay? So look at training like that. We all progress at different rates, and the reality is that some people are just going to get better at things faster than you. It's a shitty part of life, but it's a reality, and it's okay. It's not a poor reflection on you. If anything, let it motivate you to train harder. Ask them questions, ask them how they're improving quickly. Sometimes you can learn that these people are doing a lot more than you ever thought they were. So that's just a piece that I think needs to be addressed as well. I'd say if I had to maybe suggest a few things for you, if you are somebody that's ultra competitive and you get rattled really easily or you're having a particularly bad day, first, if you feel like you're kind of on the edge or losing control or you feel so defeated, I would potentially take a round off. Sit on the sidelines for a second. Think about it, try to gather yourself a little bit. There's no sense in allowing your frustration in a given training session to snowball out of control, okay? Try to take a round off if you can, rein yourself back in, breathe a little bit, change your perspective, think about the things that have been going wrong, and start to question why they're going wrong, okay? The other thing you could do is if you're finding yourself super frustrated, try alternating partners if you can, okay? You shouldn't necessarily always be, ramming your head against a wall and training with the toughest people 24/7, okay? There's nothing wrong with having periods where maybe you alternate. You have a tough training partner, and then you try rolling with somebody that you know that you can get the best of. It'll be a little bit easier for you to dictate the pace, and you can try new things. I've always been guilty in the past of, I always felt like the only way to get better was to just throw myself and find the toughest people round after round after round. And that has its benefits, but even John Danaher kind of has said that he feels like you should probably spend a lot of your time training with people that are of lesser caliber than you, not so that you can beat them up and always win, but that because you can control the pace a little bit more, you're able to practice new moves like that. Those should be the rounds where you have the opportunity to explore new ideas, to try things that aren't working on higher caliber opponents, because you need to put in the time against, less experienced grapplers to sharpen those tools, and then you slowly move up to the more difficult opponents. The other thing you can do is, again, if you're if you find yourself super discouraged, have a long game in mind. If you need to do it, take a week off, take a few days off. Again, this isn't quitting. It's not like giving up on training. But if you're too heated and you're going into training sessions with the wrong attitude, you're just going to get super frustrated and you're going to end up quitting, or you're going to end up saying, to hell with this. So understand that you need to learn yourself a little bit, and maybe you need to pump the brakes a bit. If you're getting super frustrated, maybe take a day off, relax, recoup, go home, think about things, and try to come back to the next day with more of a fresh perspective. The other thing I would say too is that understand that you're not alone, because this is a very common thing. I just don't think we talk about it enough in jiu-jitsu, because everybody's like, oh, they laugh and say, ha, you win or you learn. And it's kind of like, I think people use that to mask the fact that they're really pissed off when they don't do well, because no one really wants to be rolling with the same people and suddenly doing worse against them over time. I mean, that's not what we strive for, but it's just going to happen. It's part of the process. There are plenty of world champions that, we don't see the training that they go through. We just see kind of the finished product in the ring or on the grappling mats on these big stages. And in reality, a lot of these people have training partners that don't even compete, or are older, or are recreational, that push them and beat them in training. And I think most champions would probably say that they have training partners that beat them regularly, and they probably are all having a pretty similar experience to you. So don't necessarily judge. If you look at somebody and see them always winning in competition, don't necessarily just judge the finished product, okay? The reality, too, is that if you're training mixed martial arts, or you're training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or submission wrestling, you've chosen a very difficult sport, okay? There's a reason that not everybody is drawn to this sport, right? Because it's very revealing, okay? You are what you are, and you go out on the mats, and we all fail, and nobody wants to lose. It doesn't feel good to lose, but this is why people don't do it, because they'd rather hide behind a sport where their ego is less hurt by loss or setbacks. And I think you should just sort of applaud yourself for being part of an incredibly difficult and competitive sport. A very small percentage of people are ever going to have the sort of mental fortitude, the toughness, the dedication, and the drive and the desire to do what you're doing. So try not to beat yourself up too much, okay? You're among a very small percentage of people that are pushing themselves on a day-to-day basis. And when you choose to get involved with a sport that's that difficult, something like mixed martial arts, where you're training so many sessions a day of different disciplines, the conditioning has to be there, the strength has to be there. With all these factors at play and it being so difficult, losing and having setbacks and frustrations is part of the cost of doing business, in my opinion. So try to make peace with the fact that frustration and setbacks are going to be there. I think the biggest thing that I would suggest is that if you are having setbacks and you are getting frustrated, there's nothing wrong with that unless you just disregard it, okay? You should always be, in my opinion, you should always be asking questions, making notes. Let failure guide you. It's trying to tell you something, okay? It should give you that, the loss or the frustration you feel should then be the motivation and the fire to talk to your coaches, to go home and buy a DVD, to go home and watch matches or other fighters or other grapplers and figure out what's going wrong, okay? Again, I've been guilty of this. Sometimes I feel like the way that I like to solve problems is just by trying harder. And that has its place and can be really good, but it can also be a real meathead strategy that doesn't ultimately get you to where you want to be, because you're not addressing the root problem, okay? You're not addressing the technical deficiency or the conditioning deficiency or the strength deficiency that's holding you back. The other thing I would suggest too is, in light of that, once you have that information, maybe you've talked to your coach or you've seen videos or take the time, especially after a frustrating practice. Let's say you've had a terrible practice, you're so mad at yourself, use that frustration to drill stuff that you're not good at the end of class or later on. Find a training partner and say, can we get together and drill once in a while? Do you mind spending 10 minutes with me after class just going over this? And that's how you build skills and more resiliency. Failure is nothing more than just a tool. It's a way to show you what's going wrong. And the best way to deal with it, in my opinion, is to listen to what it's telling you and try to address those deficiencies and spend time drilling these techniques over and over again so that not only are you dealing with your frustration in a positive way, but you're growing, you're getting better, you're adding tools to your arsenal. Another concept that I would say that's important to understand, and this is something that, again, I struggle with too, is that you're not just training to win all the time in the training room. And you might be saying, well, what do you mean? Isn't that the whole point? The point of practice, yes, it's to win, but it's also to improve. And I think that there's a difference. If you always go into training feeling like I've got to win, you tend to rely on the same techniques and strategies that get you to that point. You're less willing to risk loss in an effort to try new things, okay? So try to recognize that it's okay to lose in the training room. It's not the end of the world, okay? The training room is your lab. It's the ultimate room to experiment in, to try new things in. If you're gonna fail and you're gonna perform like shit and you're gonna struggle, the training room is ultimately where you want it to happen, okay? It's not broadcast on TV. There aren't tons of people watching you. It's a small group of dedicated trainers and coaches that are all there to help you become the best version of yourself, okay? So understand that winning and improving sometimes line up, but a lot of times they don't. And again, this is somebody that I'm like that too. I hate losing, and I always want to win when I'm rolling, and I'm very competitive that way. But I'm telling you from firsthand experience, it's held me back, okay? It's held me back because, again, I tend to rely on the same things that I'm good at. I've had plenty of rounds where I've won, so to speak, but I didn't perform particularly well, and I didn't learn anything. And then I've had plenty of rounds where the opposite was true. I got my ass kicked, and I got tapped out a bunch of times, but I actually felt like I got better, like I actually tried some new things. I actually had success with stuff that I'd never had success with before. So again, understand that, progress is in the gray area. It's not always about winning in practice. And again, as somebody that's competitive, that's going to be difficult to deal with. But again, try to look at training as the lab, and the finished product that you can display and show how good you are is in competition, where it really matters, when people are looking at you, when the lights are on. That's when it matters. In the training room, it's just about sort of day-to-day bragging rights. And at the end of the day, nobody remembers. A week later, a few days later, people move on, people live their lives. You got tapped out 30 times. Just dust yourself off, show up again, and rinse and repeat. It sounds a bit cliche to say, but understand that training is a marathon. It is not a sprint, okay? If your only concern is always winning the battle of the day, that might give you immediate gratification, but sometimes it's interfering with delayed gratification, okay? So sometimes you have to take the lumps and the shitty experiences and the shitty feelings in the short term, or these small moments in training, to keep the long view in mind. Because ultimately, the only thing that matters is that you're improving and getting better. And sometimes it's easy to get lost in that when you're hyper-focused on the right now and this one training session. You lose sight of the bigger picture, okay? So sometimes take a step back and say to yourself, you know what, I didn't have a great day today, but have I made, gains in the last 6 months or something like that? The one piece I will say, as somebody that has a master's in social work, I've struggled with mental health, I've been a therapist, I've gone to therapists. If this is a piece that you really struggle with, try considering professional help. And I don't mean that as that you're weak or anything. Sometimes there's deep-rooted issues as to why you're hyper-competitive, and sometimes you're just not addressing the root cause of it. Again, it's about getting to a healthy level of competition, but, there's a lot of things that affect our personality and our motivations, and maybe the stinging of these losses speaks to something greater than jiu-jitsu or MMA. maybe there's something, more deep-seated in you that maybe you should be talking to a professional about. And again, there's tons of great sports therapists out there that are working with athletes of all levels. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But having a neutral third party outside of the sport to talk to and just bounce ideas off of, sometimes that can just relieve pressure from you. It can get you into a better mental state. And having a third person that's not associated with the sport will be able to see your situation and your issues from a different perspective. And having different perspectives, in my opinion, is really important. It gets you out of the bubble that you're always in, and it can help you to see angles and situations that you're just not aware of. So I would definitely suggest the thought of potentially having a professional to take a deeper dive with. It might be something that you try and don't like. It might be something that's a game changer for you. So as somebody that's been in the field, it's always worth a try to at least consider talking to somebody. So at the end of the day, I think that the ego is both a good and a bad thing. I think it's something that if you're a very competitive person, you're probably going to have to learn to deal with to a certain degree. So it's not necessarily about getting rid of it. It's about recognizing yourself better. It's about recognizing your patterns better. And it's about exploring different ideas and strategies that might help you cool out a little bit or help you refocus a little bit better and start to build progress and skills in a different way. So sometimes training isn't just about your jiu-jitsu skills or your strength and conditioning. It's also about the mental game. And so this could be an opportunity for you to explore a whole other side that maybe you didn't consider. Again, I always encourage you to talk to your coaches about things, especially if you're in a good training environment. Your coaches should want to help you. They should want to be there for you. They should give you suggestions, especially people that have either fought before or competed before. I guarantee you they've gone through similar experiences and will probably have some very good insight as to how to deal with it, especially if they know you well. They might be able to point out technical deficiencies or patterns that you have that are just kind of creating problems for you. So again, like a professional, having somebody from a different perspective, even within your bubble, can be a really good way to go about doing things. And again, try not to beat yourself too much over it. We're all a work in progress. You've chosen an incredibly difficult sport, probably the most difficult sport in the world. It is an emotional sport. It is a physical sport. It is not at all unusual for you to feel upset or have different bouts of, ego that's interfering with your training, and then you might have different bouts with your ego that are helping your training. So it's not about destroying your ego. It's about finding that middle ground. And at the end of the day, it's going to take a bit of thought. It's going to take a bit of training experience. And a willingness to try new things that will ultimately get you, I think, to a good place. So those are my thoughts, guys, on how to try to deal with your ego in training. It's a big topic. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any tips or ideas or experiences on how to deal with things better. Again, leave a comment below in the comments section. Let me know what you think of the video. If you want to reach out to me, as always, I'm at PFed Music. You can send me a DM there. I love to hear from people in the grappling and MMA community. Leave a message there if you want me to address a specific topic or concern, maybe in a video response and or upcoming podcast. I'm here. I'm on Facebook. I'm all over the damn place, guys. I hope you got something out of this one again, as always, and I will see you in the next video.